And good morning, everybody. We are live. Congratulations, you made it through the week. It's Friday. All the things that you did this week, all that you accomplished, man, Melody and I want to let you know that you did a good job because sometimes when you work in quality assurance and food safety, if you do a good job, nobody notices. But we're here to tell you we notice and we're glad that you're here. So thank you very much for all that you do. Everybody loves to eat, me especially. So I'm very glad that you're able to do that for us. So if you're new to the chat, welcome. My name is Bryan Armentrout, and this is the Food Safety Chat Live. I'm a consultant with the Food Leadership Group, and every week I bring an amazing expert on the chat, and we talk about all things food safety. And one of the things that you're going to notice here with the chat, this is not a lecture, this is not a presentation, this is a chat. And we enjoy the interaction. We enjoy talking with people like our good friend Austin here in Colorado and sharing a little bit of the knowledge that we've been able to accumulate over the years. And so if you're familiar with the chat and you've been here before, welcome. We're glad that you're back and you're taking an hour of your day to meet with us. If you're new, thanks. We appreciate it. Hopefully we get some value here for you. And if you've been here before, you're going to be very happy to see who we have. It's the very happy and smiling face of Melody Gee with Starkist Tuna. So she's the Director of Food Safety and Quality. Melody, how are you doing this morning?
I'm good. Happy Friday, everyone. It's so glad to
Yeah,
be back and with
absolutely.
you.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Nope, I just said it's very good to be back on the chat.
Absolutely. I love we were talking about the Niagara Falls background here as we were getting ready here for the chat. And I don't know if you know this or not, Melody, or not. I lived in Buffalo for 5 years.
Wow. Yeah, then you must be very, that's why you recognize it right away. Yeah,
Yeah,
that's
absolutely.
really
So I think that view's from the Canadian side, I believe. Yes.
yep, you got it.
Yep. So yeah, Buffalo's not too far away from Niagara. Buffalo, so I worked there. I was head of quality assurance for Lactalis American Group when I was there, and yeah, very super nice people, very friendly. It's always funny because it's upstate New York. It is not. You do not. It's upstate. We are not. You weren't part of those New York City people. This like completely different, and they were very quick to point that out. And beef on weck, which is an amazing beef sandwich on these special buns that they used to make up there. Really nice place, but oh yeah, the winter's brutal. Oh my goodness. So Cara, good morning, Cara, can probably relate to this in Wisconsin. People in Buffalo, Melody, had two cars. They had a summer car, which was nice, and they would drive it around in the summer, and it was well taken care of. And then you had a winter car that was rusty and falling apart. And if you ran into a snowbank, it was okay. And that's how people kind of adjusted to the weather there.
Wow, that's definitely good to know. See, I learn something every day. Yeah, I don't know. Wow.
Yep. And so, and watch this. I'm going to be proud of this here. And part of the objective of surviving the winter, which gets into our topic today, which we're going to be talking about in a little bit, is objectives. But before we get to that, guys, join Melody and I for a drink of your favorite beverage. Cheers.
Cheers.
Ah, very nice. Very, very nice. So, whenever Q4 rolls around, and my goodness, we're halfway through Q4 if you're working on a calendar, it's time for objectives. And so we figured this would be a great topic for today of helping people to think about and reset for the coming year, in that it's going to set you up for success or failure for that entire year. And really, I think, Melody, as a successful leader of any team, you need to be able to take a look at those outcomes and figure out any type of a roadmap that you kind of need to use to get to that. Does that make sense? Do you agree with that?
Yeah, absolutely. I think as a leader, certainly you have a vision and you wanted the team go to what direction, or you wanted your department you're leading to go to which direction you're going, well, however it fits in the business needs. And objectives is what gets you there. And that
Right.
is very important. At the end of the year, we review our objectives, set new objectives for the new year. Absolutely agree.
Yep. So, and this is Jose Sabal speaking through me, which is defining terms. So as we kind of get through this, Melody, how would you define objectives? Because I think a lot of times people get that term mixed up. What's an objective for you?
Well, I Googled it. I think the best way is to see what the meaning of the term. So what I
Mhm.
found from the dictionary is an objective is a goal, is something that you aim, or it's a salt. So it's very easy. It's straightforward. What do you want to achieve? What do you want your team to achieve? Or um, don't forget about yourself. So what do you want yourself personal to achieve in the new year? These can all be the objectives, the goals.
Right. And I think that's a great definition because, I mean, part of this is as you're setting these up is we're all familiar with the acronym SMART, right? Setting up SMART goals, SMART objectives. Anytime that you're trying to do something, Melody, you need to do that. And so for me, right, you need to set these up as SMART goals and objectives. And SMART, of course, stands for, and I wrote it down here on my little postie, specific, right? They need to have a specific outcome that you can manage. They need to be measurable. You need to understand exactly what you're measuring. It needs to be something that's not abstract, right? You can't say your objective for next year is to do a better job. What does that mean? It's not measurable. It needs to be achievable. And I think this is an important one. If you set a objective for somebody that is out of reach and they know they're not going to get to it, they're going to give up. And it's going to be frustrating for them. You're not going to get it and you're going to fail. So you need to make sure that it's actually achievable. Now, with that said, it doesn't, the other side of it too, Melody, is it can't be super simple either, right? You need to figure out what's that correct level of tension within that goal or objective to get to that next point. Next is relevant. It needs to be something that fits with what that person is doing and their skill set. And also something I think that's important to take in consideration as well, something that they're good at, right? If you have an analytical person on your team, give them analytical objectives. If you give them things that they're not going to relate to, they're going to push back against those things. And of course, the last thing is time bound. You need to have set times that this thing needs to be done by. And we all know it's like, losing weight or something like this. If you say, okay, I'm going to lose 10 pounds by the end of 2025, okay, that's a long ways off. I'm not going to worry about that until later in the year, right? And it gets pushed off. So you have to make sure that that time period within these is correct as well. So they need to be smart.
Yep, absolutely agree. Well said, Brian. And I think you have a good point of relevant. It's not only relevant to your team member, because that's what, as a leader, it's very important you utilize their strength and avoid their weaknesses to achieve the goal together. Also relevant to the vision you have, compelled to or relevant to the business vision. Like an example I always share is if our vision, one time I was told, okay, Melody, you need to go to Niagara Falls, for example, and that's the vision. Then,
Mhm.
as a leader, you're going to set it up, digest each step. Any step is a good step. Every single small step is a step you go there. However, relevant is very important because we need to make sure we're on 495, right? Going all the way up to the north. We can go Route 1 going all the way to California. So relevant is very crucial when you set it up a goal to make sure we're on the right direction to
Mhm.
achieve all those goals and objectives.
Right. And that's a really good point because that's kind of a segue into the next point. And this is a flaw that I see in our field, right? Because we're analytical people, we're technical people, and we like to control stuff, right? And that's why we work in quality and food safety, right? Is we get to stick our noses in a lot of different stuff and play in a lot of different areas, and we want control. We want to be able to make sure that things are being done correctly. But the threat and the danger with that is becoming insular. And so what do I mean by that? I mean, okay, I'm going to set up goals and objectives for my departments, and I'm going to only set up objectives that meet criteria that I can control. And that's a mistake. That's a mistake, because one of the things that we talk about here on the chat is the farther you go up in the organization, and Melody's a director, she's a high level person within Starkist, is her objectives need to tie in with the rest of the company. You just can't have quality goals and then expect to sit there and manage those without any influence or interaction with other department heads. And I've seen that flaw happen because of that kind of that tendency toward control. And you have to be really, really careful of that. So one of the things as the department leader, and as we're going through this conversation, we'll kind of talk about these different levels, is one of the things you need to be thinking about. And I have an example here. I have a little postie here on the side. There's a company that I'm working with, and we're setting up objectives for 2024. And I'm looking at this from the standpoint of what are the objectives that we need to get done into the department, but I'm spending a lot of time talking with other departments to find out their objectives, because I need to help support those too. And that's kind of the double-edged sword of being the department head and working in quality and kind of sticking our nose, as I said earlier, into other stuff. You have to understand these things. And so, for example, in your company, you need to understand for the next year, what are the company objectives financially, right? So we've been going through a lot of change in the US market this last year or two, in that inflation has been really going up and things like this, and companies have been changing their strategies. So for example, I'm sure you've seen this too, Melody, is so my wife went and bought shampoo like last week. And so she had her old bottle and she had her new bottle still. And the new bottle was a lot smaller at the same price, right? And she's like, hey, what the heck, right? So companies are revising their strategies to help meet their objectives relative to finances. So with companies, you often hear top line, bottom line. What do those mean? So top line growth for a company. Okay, well, we have $100 million in sales, and next year we want to get to $200 million in sales. That's top line growth. Bottom line is profitability. Okay, we want to increase our profitability in the company. So we're going to keep our sales the same at $100 million. But instead of having and I'm kind of getting a little bit of financial language here, so EBITDA, right? So earnings before income tax, amortization, and depreciation. We want to have a gross profit margin associated with that EBITDA number at the end of the year. Instead of 15%, we want to bump that up to 20%. So we have to reduce costs. We have to figure out new ways to make more money on what we're already making. As the department head, you absolutely have to understand that, right? And you need to tie into that, because let's say you set up examples. Let's say the company is going after increased profitability, and you come out with objectives where you are increasing your budget, you're spending more money, you're sending more people to conferences or whatever it is. You're going to get a lot of pushback, because the financial group is going to go, whoa, time out there, buddy. No, you can't do that, right? And you're going to be in for a nasty surprise if that happens. You have to understand the company objectives relative to finances when you're setting up your objectives.
Yeah, and that's very important. I think that you're right on point, Brian, that I guess at least me, I like to control. Like,
Yeah.
it's not because I am a control freak. It is because I know by doing this step by step, we will get there. And then the risks can be prevented, the products will be safe and quality and good to the products. However, it is very important that we communicate with all other department leaders to find out a balance of what's the priority of the company. And then once we understand the priority of the companies, when you come back, you will realize, oh, some of these tasks can be a little bit loosened, or we can wait till next year. And we call it simple, like pick the battle. You fight for this, or you lose that, or you fight for the other one. It all depends on what's your needs. And another thing I think throughout this journey, one of the things what we can learn from is, and it's hard, is to be comfortable with uncertainty. The reason why we control is we know there is a certainty, the outcome, the results. When we are not the person to control that task, then that is the uncertainty comes to us. And then we just have to be comfortable with that. And then to also check, with this new direction or something ad hoc to the business, do we need to change our goals throughout the journey? Do we have to adjust the priorities? Those are the things that as a leader, or when we set it up, the goals or objectives for the team, that we can constantly think and ask ourselves. Another thing I think you're really good on the point is the cost and the financial. I think it's very important to set the expectation right. Let's say, okay, the cost is this limited. Then here is what we're going to do. Okay, we might not be able to get the updated information from the conferences. We might not update an equipment this year. And this is the rework rate. Everybody needs to be very transparent and clear about this expectation. Are we still on this financial limitation? Okay, then we understand. Then we move forward. Again, it's the communication, expectation, and be comfortable with the uncertainty. And I think someone says, be comfortable with discomfort. Exactly. Yes.
Yep, absolutely. And that's a challenge. That's a challenge for technical people. We like things organized. We like things logical. And guess what? Business is not that way, right? It's not. A good example of this is our next point relative to the budget and your objectives. The other one is getting an understanding of the flux of what's going on in your businesses. So for example, your company may be in acquisition mode. They may be looking to buy other companies. If that's the case, wow, your world is about to change. So if I have a granola company and I'm the head of quality working for the granola company, and they go out and they are looking at buying a rival and incorporating that into your company, guess what? Your entire world has just changed, because now you have new people, you have new systems, you have to do gap analysis, you have to rearrange how your regional people are doing things. Everything changes. You need to understand, is the company thinking about acquisitions next year? What if your company is private? Are they thinking about going public? Maybe they're going to do an IPO. You don't know. Are they going to be building new plants? Are they going to be doing these type of things? You need to understand, what are those different big things out there they're going to impact the company, which brings up a good point too, right? Is that the farther you go up in the company, the further out the leadership is thinking. Ideally, the CEO in your company should be thinking about things that are going to be happening 3 to 5 years out, which means as the leader of quality, you need to be thinking about things from 1 to 3 years out to support those activities that are coming up. Keeping in mind, as we just talked about, right? Things do this. They're going all over the place. Things change all the time. And so part of that within the objectives that you're setting up is you need to kind of build in a little bit of buffer. You can't max out your team and say, okay, I'm going to plan this out for next year, and I'm going to make sure that my guys are 100% max. They're going to be running around like crazy animals all year round, and there's time for nothing else. You're setting yourself up for failure, because, pardon my French, shit's going to happen. Guaranteed shit's going to happen. So you need to be able to, as we're saying here, being comfortable with discomfort, you need to be able to flex. And that's one of the big lessons I learned through my career, is you need to be able to look at that. Changes in leadership. Okay. You know your boss, you understand your boss, you know how the CEO does things. Okay, one of those people leaves and a new person comes in. Completely different way of doing stuff, right? Everything has just been blown up. You need to kind of look at those tea leaves around that and see how the winds are blowing for these type of things. It kind of gets back to something we talk about here on the chat quite a bit, Melody, which is, our technical skills got us to the level we're at, but they're not that important anymore. And that's the weird thing, right? It's the people skills, right? And so with your group on LinkedIn, Women in Food Safety, and I love your shirt, by the way, right? It's helping to teach these lessons for success. And definitely join that group if you haven't joined it. It's a huge resource. So I'll give you a little bit of a plug there.
Thank you, Brian. Thanks. And then one of the things I think you mentioned really good, I don't want to lose it, is we got to be very adaptive and quick shift on our objectives when change happen. Especially we're in food safety and quality world. Um, Adaptive, open-minded really is crucial as a leader to be able to set up practical objectives as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And part of this next question then is, well, who should have objectives? We're talking about our team objectives. What about you, Melody? Should you have objectives as well?
Yeah, absolutely. I think everyone should have an objective. And for me, I guess I set up different types of objectives, objectives for the team, visions for the team, objectives of my own career. Where shall I go in 3 years? If I want to be at a certain level in 3 years, like for example, a VP or a chief officer, then what shall I do this year to get myself achieved there? And I also set up a personal goals, objectives for a new year. Um, for example, I learn one thing new every year,
Uh,
and this is something really not relevant to what I do. And just to keep myself more curious about what's going on in the world. Like I've learned photography, I've learned Korean, and then this year I learned golf. So that's also objectives too, and that's quite important because we're a human being. We live here, not just work professional. We got to think about ourselves too. So yeah, objectives almost like in my world, like I do, and I do all the time.
mhm. That's super important. So for example, Austin in our chat is a very accomplished guitarist,
Yeah.
and during COVID, I bought a bass guitar, and I'm like, I want to learn guitar, and it's sitting there staring at me. And have I done as much on it as I should? No, right? And it's kind of like, and that's part of something you need to be aware of as well, right? As long as you're making progress, as you had said earlier, Melody, and you're moving toward that goal, good, right? Don't feel like that if you're not, that you're a failure, right? As long as you're moving forward, you're doing well. So on those personal side of things, yeah, don't give up on those. They're super important.
Yeah, and then you made a very good point, the progress, because um, I guess try not to be discouraged because if you compare with 2 months ago, you don't know guitar, and then now you come on, you at least know a little bit, and that's
Mhm.
progress. Progress is not a linear, so you go like that or you go like straightforward. It can be you go 2 steps forward, 1 step back, and then the next day 3 steps forward, and that's progress, and this will make us happy, and this applies to personal and professional, and we got to remind ourselves we have come a long way, and then this is also an important message to our team as well, because we have to reaffirm them they're on the right direction, they're achieving goals, they are achieving step by step to achieve the big goal. Oh,
Right. No, that's a good point. And
yeah.
sometimes as a leader, it's helpful. What do you got there?
So I think it's quite important we look back and then to compare that we all have some improvement. It will not always be like the option one, but it could be like option three is progress too if we
Yeah.
compare with the first cup. So don't forget we all come a long way, and every single thing we do, as long as it's relevant to the objective, we are going to the direction of our goal.
It's such a good point. And I think a lot of times, sometimes I know this is true for me personally, we can kind of be pessimistic in quality, right? If things aren't absolutely perfect, I didn't look back and say, okay, where was I at a year ago versus where am I now? Oh, well, no, actually things are a lot better than they were. And that's important to reflect back on that and think about that. And it gets back in, the SMART goals, right? Achievable, right? You're achieving that. You're moving forward. And sometimes, and this is where as leaders, we can help our teams in that we can help remind our team that no, we're doing good. We're doing good, guys. We're making progress. Because part of the challenge in food safety and quality assurance and what we do is progress is a fight sometimes. right? It's these little incremental steps that you're making, and you're moving forward, but sometimes it's hard to see. So I think that's a great point. Here's a pitfall of something that I learned that you have to be very careful for, and this is kind of a pet peeve of mine, Melody, is when you're setting up these objectives and thinking about how these interact and how they're relevant with other departments and things like this. One of the things that you'll notice that I've avoided is vision and mission statements for the companies. Oh, I hate those. I hate them because they're written more for the shareholders than anybody else. And when you read them, you end up mostly with a headache because it'll be a bunch of catchphrases and buzzwords, right? It'll be like, here at XYZ Company, we seek to strive and reach the paradigm of optimal world community or blah, 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 right? And it tells you absolutely nothing about how to actually execute against things, right? It's pretty and it's sparkly and it's meant to make the company look nice, but it doesn't give you any direction. So in 95% of the cases, ignore that and don't use that as a starting point for setting up objectives.
I don't disagree, Bryan, but I would translate a little bit because I think company mission and statement, they design it for a reason, and that whatever reason, it's our brand, it's the company position in the market, and that is why the executive team or department head is important because we are here to translate those mission to our own area, our own department function, to our team, and to support and achieve that goal. Yes, sometimes it's super vague, very vague that you don't understand where it goes. But when we translate it to our own function, that's our role actually. Why I say that is because it is very easy during the work that you use that mission to convince your boss who make them. And they were like, oh, that is why, how it connected. Somehow it works. It depends. But I would say we can translate those in our own department function because it will mean completely different thing to quality versus to my sales team, for example.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think we're saying the same thing. Right? It's just be careful with how you do that. So let's kind of get into the meat of the objectives and creating objectives. So as we said, right, we need to create objectives for you and your team. And one of the things that you'll notice that I've kind of used a couple words here interchanged is objectives and goals. Difference between a goal and an objective. A goal is more of a short-term thing, right? It's like our goal this month is to reduce complaints by whatever, right? It's not really an objective. It's something that you're working on. An objective is more formalized, right? This is our objective for next year. And generally what you want to do is break these down into categories and say objectives for quality, objectives for food safety, objectives for team development. And that last one, super important. A lot of times this gets left out. And what I'll do for objectives for my team members, Melody, is I'll always have a section in there for growth and training. And what I'll do there is I won't dictate that. So I'll have budget money set aside for those objectives. And I will meet with the team members and I'll say, okay, guys, let me know what you're thinking for next year for training. What would you like to know? Would you like to get more skill in Excel and PowerPoint? Do you want to learn more about food safety? It could be that person, as part of their career objectives, maybe doesn't, they want to move to operations instead of quality. Great, right? If they're a good resource for the company, that's great. Okay, let's put some objectives in place where you can work with the engineering group and do some equipment qualification work and see if you like those type of activities. Building those things in. Now, of course, right, you need to check these objectives. So if one of the objectives is I want to visit Disneyland and evaluate no, right? And people don't do that, right? You very rarely see that, but they need to have a stake in those development objectives, and those need to link to your conversations you have with them on what their career objectives are. Where do they want to go, and how can you help them get to those objectives? Because as you were talking about earlier, Melody, as well, is if you personally have a goal, right? It's like, okay, I'm director and I want to become VP within 3 years. That means you need to train your replacement, and you should always be doing that. I heard a good quote from Scott Adams, the Dilbert cartoonist who does podcasts and things like that. He said one of his rules in his latest book is your job is to find your next job. Right? So what are you doing to prepare yourself for the next level, right? And in order to do that, you need to develop that skill behind you to do that. And the benefits of that are amazing, because if you have a strong team who can step up and help you with those type of things, makes your life just that much easier.
Yep, absolutely agree. I think only you support, grow your team better and better, and then we can grow together. And I grow, they grow. They help. Like yeah, absolutely agree. It grows together. Everyone is together within a team. Yeah.
And it builds trust, right? If through subconscious, unconscious activities or things that you do or say, right, your team is watching you all the time. And if they get the impression that you're just out for you, they're going to figure that out pretty quick, right? You need to be there for your team and help your team grow.
Yeah, absolutely. And another thing also important is share the objectives. Communication is also important. Share the objectives with the team, share the objectives with your boss, share everyone's objectives among each other. So that way we know where the resources are, where the strengths are, where our other team members' objectives are. It's very easy to create a team culture.
Yeah, absolutely. That's an important point. It's not in the SMART objectives, but it should be. Maybe there should be another T in there. Your objectives need to be transparent. So back to my weight loss example. If I want to lose weight next year and I don't tell anybody, I can drop it pretty easy. But if I make that commitment to my wife and say, okay, honey, I'm going to lose 10 pounds. And she says, good, it's about time. And she's going to hold me to that, right? So I'm munching on a cookie and she's like, oh, how's that weight loss coming along there, Bryan? Oh, yeah, you're right. I put the cookie down, right? You need to have that transparency and accountability. And that's also to say, to your point, right, as you're looking at the goals and objectives within your department, there's absolutely no rules against having objectives within your department that work with other departments. So for example, let's say you want to improve how processes work with procurement. A super important objective. So let's say that you have regional quality people and they're doing things with the procurement team and things like that. Go to the head of procurement and talk with them and say, okay, let's set an objective up between our departments so that we can improve our systems. Let's put a new scorecard system in place for our suppliers between our two groups that we can put in place next year. Perfect, right? Because that's one of the things that we struggle with in quality is, oh yeah, those darn procurement people, they keep buying crappy materials at cheap prices and it's causing us quality problems. Okay, work with procurement.
Yep, definitely. Oh, that's a very good point, actually. Share the objectives among other functioning department. That's very important, especially if you're considering, like your team is considering transitioning from tradition management system in QA and food safety to a digital or smarter. And then definitely you need to buy in IT support. And IT is the busiest department in the whole company. So sharing objectives is very crucial so that they can set aside some time to help you work together on your own project.
Oh, that's a super important one. And that one's burned me in the past before. Is IT, to your point, super busy. They have all kinds of departments that are coming to them, right? The sales group wants a new CRM module for customer management. The marketing group wants a new artwork program for routing and approval, right? Everybody wants a new system. And IT has to prioritize that as well. And they have objectives for next year. And this goes back to the financial piece we were talking about as well. So if the IT group has been locked down on additional capital spending for next year, you need to know that, because now you're in trouble for hitting those objectives. But if you need, for example, a new food safety program to do something, you need to be working with the IT group to make sure that's on the objectives list for next year. Because if it's not, ain't going to happen. So very important. Here's a good example as well of things to avoid. You need to be really, 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 can I throw another really? Yeah. Really careful on what you choose as objectives. So what do I mean by that? You have to look at what you're measuring, because that's the results you're going to get. So let's say, for example, you put an objective in your plants of, I want 0 positive results for Listeria in the environment for swabbing for 2024. That's a stupid objective.
That's a scary objective.
That's exactly what you'll get, because now all of a sudden your quality manager is going to go, oh crap, I've got a huge Listeria problem in my plant. I'm not going to hit my objective. I'm going to sample areas that I know are clean, right? I'm going to sample after sanitation. I'm going to sample like this, boop, right? I'm going to, oh, I don't know, maybe have a little sanitizer in the Whirlpack bag when I put the sample in there, right? All these hidden things, and you're going to get screwed, because you're going to think your environmental results are great, and you're going to go to your boss and say, look at how amazing my environmental sampling results are for this year. Last year, we had 25 hits in the environment. This year, we have 0. What an amazing head of quality I am. You're in for a big surprise, right? Be careful what you manage. I had a very wise operational vice president say to me one time, he said, Bryan, if I look at the objectives for environmental monitoring and I don't see a 3 to 5% positive rate in the environmental testing results, it means you're not doing your job and you're not looking hard enough. And you know what? He was right. He was right. You have to look at those things. Be careful. Be very, very careful what you measure. So you're setting up these objectives in these categories, and you're working with your team. You're working with other departments to set these up. The other key piece of this as well is also then, how do you reflect on these? It's a huge mistake to wait until the annual review to say, you didn't do too good on your objectives. Right? No. Here's a little bonus. The annual review, performance review for your team members should maybe take 15 minutes. Why do I say that? Because if you're doing a good job up front, it's a very simple process, because they already know what you're going to say. You already know what they're going to say. They already expect the score that you're giving, because everything is clear and transparent, because they know already how they're doing, and it doesn't become a fight. Now, are you going to have sometimes recalcitrant employees or people who are difficult to deal with? Of course. And, they may be a 2 out of 5 employee and they rate themselves a 5. Okay, well, that's not a good fit for that. And that then becomes part of that next process, but that's a different conversation. So it needs to be very clear. So here's Melody. Here's how I used to do this is, so I would set up objectives for my team and myself. And I had in my office installed a giant whiteboard, huge, one of the biggest whiteboards I could find. And I went and bought graphics tape, and I divided it up into little cells on there. And I had everybody, me, every director under my department, not every single team member, there's no way I could fit everybody on, but the leaders, right? And I would have a weekly meeting, and on that board was the objectives. And we would then say, okay, what are we doing this week to hit our objectives? Bob, what are you doing this week? And let's say Bob was regional quality or whatever. And he's like, okay, I'm going to visit 2 co-packers this week. Awesome, right? So we could look at that list and make sure that we were staying on track. And I would write on that board what they were doing. Was it old school? Yeah. But anybody who walked by my office could poke their heads in there and look at that board and knew exactly what my team was doing that week. And it kept us on track. And if somebody started venturing off into a different area, I, as the leader, could say, well, hold on a minute there, Sally. What are you working on? What does that have to do with the board? Right? Oh, well, this big problem came up and this other department needs this. And okay, fine. Let me look into that. So now my job as the department head was to go to talk to that department head and say, hey, here there's a problem and my team's getting pulled into it. Let's talk about let's talk about that. And it may be something the company needs done. That happens, right? All the time. But it provided that kind of that true north of here's the direction we're heading. And every quarter, I had a one-on-one meeting with my team members, and we went over those objectives to make sure that things were working out correctly. And as I'd said, by the time the end of the year rolled around, reviews were always very simple.
Yeah, I think that's a really good tip to board, Brian. Thanks for sharing. That's really, I wrote it down because ultimately in the company, we're facing um, resource issues. It comes down to if we want to achieve a goal, we want to achieve an objective, time, people, money, right?
Mm-hmm.
And different department has different priorities. And then when we have a board like that, it's very easy also help to our team. They know, okay, of course, I need to go with the direction of my objective unless I have a discussion with my boss that is the objective changed. But then it really helps. What is the resource? What is the time to spend? And that is, like you said, it's a true north. That's a very good tip for the board.
Yeah, and so part of what I do as well is so that like that little postie I flipped up here. I will shop those objectives around. So I will talk with my boss, right? Super important, right? Hey, boss, here's the objectives I'm thinking about for next year. What you thinking? We need to work on this, and here's the training ideas, and here's, I'm hearing that we're looking at some potential acquisitions, so I want to, look at this or whatever. Super important. You sit down with your boss and say, before you even write them out, here's the draft of my departmental objectives for next year. What you thinking? They need to link together. To your point earlier with so the highest objective of the company are those mission and vision statements. And how does that all cascade down? How do you support it? How does that work within the company, right? You need to make sure that you're not missing anything.
Absolutely. I think one of the things I also agree 100% with you was when you're mentioning the listeria, the measurable. I also have another thought on this as well, but a similar example is the audit score. So we have so many audits right now in the industry, and then how you define and measure an audit success is come from you as a leader. How you I would like to put a SMART in the objective as well. Just the SMART itself, because that's the message you deliver to your team. Let's say if they say, okay, I want a 0 positive on my listeria. And I could also say, okay, you know what? Next year, your objective is 100 of an audit or a very good score of an audit. But what did you get really? And does that help your direction of the company? Like if you want to encourage food safety culture, or if you want to encourage your team to think, to do risk assessment truly, then start from us as a leader to get that objective out of your objective every year, the audit score objective, and then truly tell them, and don't be so harsh or freak out with the fluctuate on the score, because that is where you're training your team to go, if that is your objective or if that is your goal. So I think those two gets hand in hand as well. I just want to share with the group, share with you as well. Audit score is another thing typically people would put in objective.
Oh, that's a great point. So let's tease that out a little bit more. So let's say, for example, you give your quality manager at the plant an objective of having an audit score of greater than 95%.
It's scary.
So quality managers become quality managers in some cases because they're good at hiding stuff, right? So the auditor shows up and the quality manager knows there's problems in the plant. And they're like, okay, well, I'm going to steer the auditor in this way. And when I give the tour, and I'm going to avoid this, and I'm going to make sure he doesn't talk to this bad employee. And when the auditor asks for training records, I'm going to have 5 perfectly prepared training records that he can review, and all these type of things. That's bad, right? That's not underlying 3 times, not the purpose of the audit. The purpose of the audit is to improve the plant, right? And you need a good auditor to help you do that. You want the auditor, and we've seen, Melody, the opposite side of that as well. A quality manager who is so desperate to improve the plant that he will show the auditor problems.
And
Like,
put it on the report.
like, yeah, Mr. Auditor, you should really take a look at this piece of equipment over here if I were you, right? Because they have no support, and they're trying to get things fixed, and nobody's listening to them. We've all seen, and this again, right, is setting up bad objectives. So let's say that cascades through the entire organization, that 95% objective. You can see that in the closeout meeting if you're the auditor. You don't see the plant manager for the entire audit. You only have the quality manager with you. You have the closeout meeting. The plant manager shows up and says, okay, what's my score? Right? My boss is sitting at corporate waiting for the score. What'd we get? What'd we get? And let's say the auditor comes back and says, well, you got a 93. The next step is the auditor and the quality and the plant manager start fighting, right? And the plant manager is like, wow, what did you write us up for? Well, I saw some people who weren't washing their hands correctly or something like this. What? No, my people do a great job washing their hands. Right. And they start doing this because the only objective the plant manager has is to get that 95.
Yep. Yeah. These all ties together. It starts from the leader, the perspective, what kind of message you would like your team to get, and so that they can slowly achieve to the goal that you set it up ultimately, or the vision of the team.
Yeah. And so with his examples, and I want to hammer on this a little bit more, is part of your job as a leader within the quality organization is to root out these attempts to create a false narrative. So complaints. So consumer complaints, super important. The consumers are doing you a gigantic favor. Most people don't complain. And the ones that do are not happy with you at all. And they're probably telling other people that they're not happy with you at all. So my cup of coffee, right? I get my cup of coffee and it's bitter and it tastes really awful. And it's not what I normally expect. And I complain. How do I handle that on the corporate side of things, the quality person who's receiving these complaints? If I have a system that's put in place to categorize these and kind of shove them off to the side, let's say, for example, I complain on this coffee and I contact this coffee company and I say, oh my God, your coffee is terrible. It used to be really good and now it's bitter. And here's the lot code from the coffee and these type of things. And as the quality person, I look at this and say, oh, well, that coffee is expired. All right, I'm going to throw that complaint out. That's old coffee. That's why that's bitter. Okay, well, you may hit your complaint goal, but is that really the reason?
Yep.
If you're, and it's subtle, right? It's subtle. It's mindset. It's, why am I doing this? Am I doing this to hit my number, or am I doing this to improve? Mm-hmm. And as a leader, that's super important. You need to tease that out.
Absolutely agree. Absolutely agree.
So another thing that I see quite a bit as well, Melody, is can objectives change? So let's say, for example, you put all these objectives in place for your team and things change during the year and the company changes focus and they're acquired, somebody purchases them or things like this. Do you keep those objectives in place, or what do you do? Do you change them? How do you handle that?
I think of course, I think we will change the objective along the way. Because one of the T is time bound, like you said, right? So if things changed or direction changed of the business, or like you mentioned, the leadership changed, the focus changed, then we definitely will tag along to change our objectives. However, during this whole part, I think the important piece is the why. How you explain to the boss, how you explain to the team why it's changed. Change is scary because it's unknown. And people would be complain for sure. I've worked 6 months and then we just set aside, or I've achieved it so far, we just set aside. No, it depends on how you communicate to your team, to your boss, even to yourself. Why we change the objectives. This is why. And how are we coming back? Is your what you do wasted? All these are the questions you get be prepared to share with your team. Like we talked the whole time today, progress is not linear. It's not like Austin also perfectly summarized it. It's not perfectly incremental. We gotta still encourage them. They cannot be discouraged, and then you still need them to be with you together during this change of objectives.
Yeah.
Again, I think to answer the question, absolutely objectives have to be changed. It can't be just like that because it can be like in a silo because we are living in a company, in a society, things change, people change, environment change.
Yeah.
Objectives has to change and be objective, but it's important is how we communicate these
Mm.
change to the team within the organization with the other department head. That's the key to support a timely bound changeable objectives.
Right. Well, I mean, yeah, let's say, for example, one of your key team members resigns and leaves the company.
Yeah.
That changes everything, right? You don't have to doggedly stick to those. Um, they are malleable, and you need to explain this to your boss, right, on why these things are changing, and you need to be able to communicate that. So if you haven't noticed, one of the large themes here, and this comes up on our chats quite a bit, is there's what you control and what you don't control. And as the leader within the quality department, you need to be focusing more on those things outside of what you do. One of the lessons, Melody, that I would always teach my quality team is that I don't care who you are in the company. You only have direct influence over a very small group of people. So think about it. Even the CEO of the company, if the company is set up correctly, has maybe 5 or 6 direct reports, right? So you got operations, sales, marketing, finance, these groups that report into the CEO directly. That's it. Because one of the rules is you should really not have any more than 5 or 6 people directly reporting to you, because this goes back to what we're talking about here today. You can't directly understand what people are doing if it gets much larger than that, and it gets really, really hard. So you need to make sure it's set up correctly in that organization to have that influence. So conversely, on that side of that, so in my past as VP of QA, I had 4 directors reporting to me, and then they had their teams, 4 people, right? And in the organization, the actual number of people reported to me, all the way down through the plants and everything else, was still a small percentage of the overall company population. That's normal, right? If you're going to be successful, you have to influence outside of your direct authority. Because if you try to go down this path of, I'm the boss and this is what I say and you work for me and you have to do this, that doesn't work, right? Even you may be able to force somebody to do something under your direct authority, but it's a very bad strategy. And being able to understand and influence outside of your direct authority is extremely important. So to our earlier example, working with the procurement head and saying, hey, listen, let's set up some common objectives between our departments so that we can move this forward. Now, you're going to be evaluating your team on those objectives. He's going to be evaluating his team on those objectives. Win-win, right? Now you have direct authority, as opposed to, I'm going to try and force procurement to do what I want. Never. That never works. That's not human nature. If anything, procurement is going to resist you. They're going to say, well, that doesn't meet my objectives. My objectives are to purchase ingredients at the lowest cost possible and have them on time, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
I'm not going to get a raise based upon what Bryan wants. Screw him. You're going to kill yourself if you try and do that. It never, ever works. And you need to understand that, right? And that's, I think, hopefully we're doing a good job today of getting this message through.
Yeah, hopefully.
Tell us what you really think, Bryan. Yeah. So as we kind of, wow, time is flying here, Melody. As we kind of bring it up here back to the 30,000 foot level for our audience, what are some of the key takeaways that you're getting out of our conversation today? What would you like to leave people with?
Oh, wow. We talked a lot. I think, first of all, definitely we need objectives. That's very important. And then the communication of the objectives are important. Um, don't get on tied on the objectives. It can be changed. It's a timely bound objectives to set it up. And then don't get discouraged as well when objectives can didn't go the right direction that you wanted to go because it will eventually get there. It's just how you measure it, how you look back. Take some time to look back. We've come a long way. Um, I think another thing I would like to share is objectives does not always work out. It's just
Mhm.
nature. It's okay with that. And um, yeah, that's about it. I think that's quite some key message that I would like to share. Communication, change, set up the right objectives, and then take time to look back. We all have come a long way, one way or the other.
Right. That's a good point. And that, let's say you didn't complete your goal 100%, and maybe it was not necessarily achievable, and things happen, right? But if you got 80% there, wow, look back to your example with the glasses half full and half empty. Man, you made some amazing progress this year. So sitting back and reflecting on these type of activities is very important too. Um, Part of this as well is, remember, don't do this in a bubble, right? Look for support, look for groups. And that's part of the reason why you're here today on this chat, is to get new perspectives and figure out better ways to do things. And to your point, Melody, earlier, and I'm very honored that you had said this, is if you can pick up one new little tip or trick from somebody else that they learned and you can implement that, awesome, right? You're making progress yourself. And that's what we're all here for. And here, let me throw this on that note. Let me throw this here in the chat. Here is the LinkedIn group website for women in food safety that Melody leads. So if you'd like to join that, you can go to that link there and join up with Melody on that, right? Because as we talk about on this chat all the time, right, is in what we do, we have our group, we have our company, but we also have our profession. And in food safety, everyone is working on this together. We all have commonality of objectives between our different companies. So every food safety manager who works in ice cream has some of the same objectives of every other ice cream food safety quality manager. So we all eat food, and if we can succeed together, man, that's a huge benefit. So don't think you got to do this on your own, right? That's the other piece of
No,
it as well.
absolutely. Definitely,
And
you're not alone. Thank you so much, Brian, for sharing women in food safety. Yes, because we are a group that designed to tell you we're not here alone. We work all these together. We share technical experience, technical knowledge, interpersonal knowledge, soft skills, everything that can help us get together to make food safe and good quality to our consumers. So,
absolutely.
yeah, fine.
And and in that spirit of sharing this information, so as I've talked about here, right, I launched a couple of weeks ago, and I'm super excited about this, is the food safety chat database online. So I'm very aware that, right, we're all super busy, and using an hour of your busy week on Fridays to sit in on the chat is hard. It's very hard to do, and I'm very grateful for Claire and Cara and Ryan and Austin and the others who are able to be here on a regular basis. But being here every single week is hard. And if you missed this chat, right, you missed some really good stuff from Melody. So being able to go back and review this information in your own time is super valuable. So with the chat online, so for all of the food, I've been doing this now for over 3 years, and all of these chats are now available. So you can go back and rewatch this, or read the transcript, or download the MP3 and listen to it in your car on the way to work, right? So I'm giving different options on how you can pick these things up. So it just seemed like such an incredible waste to not have this out there for people as a resource. So I'm very happy with that.
Oh my gosh, Brian, I gotta give you applause.
Okay.
3 years. Wow, that's quite an achievement. I still remember at the first couple episodes and then we went through COVID, right? Three
Yeah.
three years. Wow, great. Kudos on that. It's
Well,
really,
thank you.
and it really, I'm happy to see how success it turned out. The content, every time you have someone on your show, like I try to stick on, it's really good content. And it's my pleasure, my honor to be
Mhm.
invited on this chat as well to share with everyone.
Well, yeah, my goal on this whole thing is just to bring the experts on and then provide a forum to share their information. So I'm very happy that I'm able to do that. So with that, guys, we'll bring our chat to an end. Super valuable chat here today, Melody. Thank you very much. Great information.
Thank you.
And thank you everyone for attending as well. We really appreciate you as well. So with that, we'll bring our chat to a close here this week. So enjoy your weekend, right? So part of being able to work, as you had said earlier, Melody, we're people and you need to have balance. Enjoy your weekend. Go have some fun. Go to a festival. Learn to play guitar. I need to get my bass guitar out and work on that this weekend. So have some fun. Thank you for all you do for food safety. And we'll see you back here next week on Friday at the same time. So 8 a.m. Mountain Time, 10 a.m. Eastern. We live stream on LinkedIn, YouTube, and Twitter. And join us for that next food safety chat. In the meantime, thank you very much. And we'll see you next week. Have a great weekend, Melody, and everybody else as well. Thanks, everybody.
Have a nice weekend.